The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot, sharp, sudden, and so out of place that every fork froze mid-air for a moment. Even the humming lights above seemed to flicker in disbelief. The old man didn't fall, didn't shout, didn't even lift a hand to defend himself. He just sat there in that red booth, blood blooming across his cheek, like a cruel stain on a life already weathered by too many battles. The biker who struck him stood over the table breathing hard, his vest hanging open, his fists still clenched. People watched, stunned, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they hadn't seen a thing. No one knew the truth yet. No one knew who this old man really was, or what the next few minutes were about to reveal. If you believe in kindness, courage, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more people discover stories that remind us what humanity should look like. The old man's name was Leonard Brooks, an 81-year-old veteran who had survived war, loss, and a lifetime of quiet endurance. He entered the diner that morning, the same way he did every Thursday, slow steps, a soft smile, and a habit of holding the door open for whoever walked in behind him. That simple kindness is what started the chain of events. Because the men who followed him inside weren't ordinary customers. They were a group of hardened bikers, their jackets heavy with patches and their expressions just as heavy with something darker. Leonard held the door for them anyway, nodding politely, unaware of the storm that would follow. He took his usual seat by the window, trying to ease the ache in his hip. The diner smelled of coffee and bacon, and for a brief moment he was back in 1969, sitting in a mess hall overseas, surrounded by brothers in arms who never made it home. He rubbed the side of his neck, feeling the edges of old memories pressing into him. He didn't notice the bikers whispering, didn't see the way one of them kept glancing toward him with a look. That wasn't anger, but something like recognition twisted into resentment. What no one else knew was that the biker who confronted him, Mason, had a history connected to Leonard, though neither of them had expected to cross paths in a small-town diner. Mason's older brother had served in the same unit as Leonard, but unlike Leonard, he hadn't returned. Mason had grown up hearing a single story from the few who survived, that his brother died trying to protect someone. Mason had spent decades simmering in grief, believing that someone was the quiet old man now sitting in the booth before him. As Mason approached, Leonard had lifted his eyes slowly, confused but calm. That only made Mason angrier. He demanded answers, accusations spilling out, years of guilt and sorrow, mixed with a misunderstanding he had never bothered to question. The rest of the diner watched, paralyzed, as Mason's voice shook the room. Leonard tried to speak, but age had slowed his words, and before he could finish explaining, Mason struck him across the face. The blow shocked Leonard, but what hurt more was the rage he saw in the younger man's eyes. It reminded him of too many lost soldiers' boys who carried pain they didn't know how to name. Leonard's vision blurred as blood trickled down his cheek, but he didn't raise a hand. Instead, he took a slow, trembling breath and tried again to explain. The diner stayed frozen. The waitresses stood by the counter, torn between fear and instinct. The two men sitting in the booth behind Leonard watched with guilt, knowing they should do something but terrified of provoking the rest of the biker group. And then, just when the diner seemed to hold its breath forever, something unexpected happened. The biggest biker in the room, the one standing by the door, arms crossed, a tower of tattoos and intimidating silence, stepped forward. Everyone thought he was going to back Mason up, escalate things, make it worse, but instead he walked toward Leonard and crouched, slightly to meet the old man's eyes. His voice, when it came, wasn't hostile, it was low, surprised, and heavy with realization, because he, too, recognized Leonard. His father had served under Leonard, had spoken of him, not as a survivor who cost others their lives, but as the man who pulled him from the wreckage of a burning vehicle in the middle of gunfire. The biker's father wouldn't have come home at all if not for Leonard Brooks. He'd talked about it until the day he died. The diner shifted. The tension drained, replaced by a quiet that bordered on reverence. Mason froze, his anger collapsing into confusion. His friend looked between the men, unable to reconcile the image of the trembling elderly veteran with the heroic stories passed down from his father. Leonard finally spoke clearly. He explained what really happened overseas, that Mason's brother had saved him, not the other way around, that Leonard had carried the weight of that loss for decades, visiting the fallen soldier's grave every year, whispering apologies into the cold morning air. Leonard's voice broke, not from fear, but from a sorrow he had never fully put down. Mason's breath hitched as reality cracked through years of misplaced bitterness. The big biker placed a steadying hand on Mason's shoulder, grounding him. Mason stared at Leonard, tears forming at the edges of eyes that had known too much anger and not enough peace. He sank into the booth across from Leonard, his head bowed, the slap now feeling like a shameful scar on his conscience. Leonard reached for a napkin, dabbing the blood from his cheek, not angry, not resentful, just tired and deeply human. The diner wasn't silent anymore. Something warm spread through it, something fragile but real. The two men, who had been too afraid to intervene, walked over with gentle apologies and a fresh cup of coffee. The waitress brought a first aid kit, hands trembling as she dabbed antiseptic on Leonard's cheek. The bikers stood around, not threateningly, but protectively, as if realizing they had almost destroyed something sacred. Mason finally whispered that he was sorry. Leonard nodded softly, offering forgiveness without hesitation, because he understood the grief that twists people into something they're not. And in that small-town diner, surrounded by red booths and the smell of coffee, something rare happened. Brokenness met compassion, and compassion won. If the story moved you even a little, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes the world can be better than it is. Before we end, please comment below. Kindness changes everything.